You have now entered the Pretty Tough Welcome to the Pretty Tough Room podcast. I'm your host, Sadell P. And today's topic is bounce back from it. Bouncing back is to return or recover quickly to a normal condition after a difficult situation, a difficult season, or a difficult event. The word bounce means to spring or ricochet. Now, when I hear the word bounce, naturally I think of a ball. In order for a ball to bounce, it has to hit something with enough force for it to actually do so. Our journeys through life are like a ball. We endure much, and sometimes with such force that it takes the bounce out of us. But like a ball, that force is designed to elevate us to new heights. That force is what is used to allow us to actually bounce back. Now, in order to bounce back from something, we should do three things. We should first roll with it. We should second take responsibility of it. And then we should third redefine it. The first key point that I'm going to talk about is rolling with it. Now, you don't have to take it lying down or accept it like, poor me. That's not what I mean by roll with it. What I mean is to accept that it is happening. And, it is your right now. And when you accept that it's your right now, you also have to accept that you have to go through to get through. And it's as simple as that, right? It's like an entrance to something. So an entrance to your home, to your work, or your favorite restaurant. You'll never get inside to your couch. You'll never make it to your workstation. You'll never be seated in that restaurant if you don't go through that entryway. It's your when you're in your low place or your situation or whatever you're trying to bounce back from, if while going through you don't admit and accept that you are in a situation, then you'll remain the same, and then there's no room to get better. So we got to be mindful, not even mindful. We just have to be accepting of where we are in that moment, and don't even think back on like how you got there. You just got to, the first step is to accept where you're at. Because sometimes we tend to walk around and we know that we're going through stuff, but we try to mask it and not deal with it and turn away from it. But it's better if we just be in the present of that thing and accept, like, what, I'm in this place right here, right now, and I don't necessarily like it, but this is where I am. That's how you can start before you bounce back from whatever it is that you're dealing with. And in order to bounce back, you don't just roll with it and accept it. It's important to be watchful, right? So Luke chapter 21 and 36 says, "But stay awake at all times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things that are going to take place and to stand before the Son of Man." Be watchful, pay attention, making sure that, when you're in your situation, if you're, accepting of it, then you want to be watchful, and then you pray. You pray about where you're at in that moment, and you ask God to help you. But you have to know that when you are watchful, it gives you a strength. It gives you a strength to be able to be in that moment instead of focusing and worrying on worrying about what is to come or what's going to happen or the outcome of that thing. Pay attention to where you are mentally. So what are you thinking about? What are you believing about your situation? What are the emotions you're feeling, the triggers that contribute to those emotions? Like, pay attention to your movements and how you interact and how others interact with you. Be watchful of the people and places, that help or even hinder your growth in this season. You got to be mindful. Watchful is being mindful and, being in the present, keeping account to, like, when I'm thinking about this thing and then what triggered you to think about that thing. If it's something that's connected with your going through, then it would be beneficial for you to understand where you're at mentally, and the types of emotions that is tied into what you're dealing with. You also got to be watchful in how you respond to what's going on. That's key to a lot of things in life, is your response to things. If you don't pay attention and you're not intentional about how you handle your going through, you may even allow more opposition to occur when you could be well on your way to your breakthrough. But because you respond in a different way, if something happened to you and it upset you, it hurt you, it devastated you, if you're not intentional about how you respond to that, instead of kicking and screaming, instead of blaming, instead of getting revenge, then and being intentional about, like, understanding that's where you at, being intentional about, like, doing it a different way or handling it a different way. If you don't do that, if you don't pay attention, in your response, you might allow the opposition to occur even more. It's one of those things where we're like, if it ain't one thing, it's another. Our mindset, wherever we're mentally at, if we start taking things in that way, then we'll put out that way too. So our attitudes and things like that, because like I've said before, we're products of our environment. And if we're creating environments that are mentally draining and physically draining, then, we'll move in that. And then it makes it harder for us to be able to bounce back. So don't just go through it, but be present in your going through and rejoice, know trouble doesn't last always, and you will bounce back from it. And when you do, it'll be better than before. And it may help to, record your journey in the press so that you can see progress or even see cycles that you're in. And that those things may or may not allow for you to move forward in your situation. Writing things down or keeping an account of what is happening can help you to visually see your progress, and oftentimes, will provide you with more oomph to keep going, more drive, and more momentum to keep going in your going through. You can also see where you may be continuing in certain cycles that may keep you from bouncing back. So, if you write things down, you can always refer back to it. And I know I like to do it sometimes. And, if I'm having a really bad day, I'll just utilize the time to write, to either express how I'm feeling, because I don't want to put stuff in the atmosphere that, you sow into the earth and it comes back, or because I want to go back later just to see, how far I've come. And it's easier to do that if you record it in some way. You don't necessarily have to write it down. Technology today allows you to voice record, while you want to go. So that's a good tool to use. Like if you're having a bad day or something happened, recording, your journey, and go back and listen in intervals to see, how you've overcome, because you will overcome it, but you got to be intentional and you have to choose and want to overcome and bounce back. Another thing you should do is endure in your situation. you'll suffer a little and it don't feel good. But in order to bounce back from something, you have to endure the press. You have to endure the stretching, and you have to be okay with uncertainty, because there's no easy ways out. Right. It may seem that way when we operate in and of ourselves, but if we rush the process of our trials, we may miss our true breakthrough because the test seems unbearable to actually journey through. But it's not. We can make it that way. You know, I know you don't want to be in the thick of it. Nobody wants to be in the thick of it. And most times we try to find ways out of our situation. And that's human nature. And even the best of them, whoever they are, face opposition that they want to hurry up and get over or hurry up and get through. So you're not the only one. It's not a bad thing to want to be out of it, but it's not a good thing when you force yourself out of something prematurely, because you still have to go through the process. The other people would have to go through the process before you can access, before you can see, and before you can appreciate the victory. You grow and gain nutrients in the thick of it. So even though we don't like being in the thick of it, that's where we get all of the growth. That's where we get the lessons. That's where, we get tools from. It's in the thick of it. Now, James chapter 1, verses 2 and 4 says to consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so you become mature and well developed and not deficient in any way. See, even God is teaching us here that we should count it all joy when we're going through, when we're in the thick of it. And because we know our whole lives we have dealt with some type of adversity. So that should tell us like adversity is going to come. And sometimes it comes all at once and it feels very uncomfortable. The pressure seems too much to bear, but that pressure is what produces, what you need. It produces the nutrients. It produces development for you, and then you're not lacking anything because you're learning in that process. It really is in the valley or in your storm that you gain knowledge, not when you come out. You see, because coming out displays the more developed version of you or your situation versus the version before you went in. My second point is to self-evaluate in your season. In order to bounce back, you should self-evaluate. Proverbs 28:13 says that you can't whitewash your sins and get by with it. You find mercy by admitting and leaving them. So whatever it is that you may have done or whatever, part you may have played in you're going through in your situation or whatever that thing is you want to bounce back from, if you do a self-evaluation and find out what things you done that wasn't right, or, what part did you play that contributed to this thing, then you open up the door for forgiveness from God. And you can't expect somebody else, to forgive you if you're not in a forgiving mood, but your sins, the things that you've done, not necessarily sins so religiously or biblically, but the things that didn't work out, the things you didn't do so well, those things, you can't just erase them or ignore them. They're always going to be there. So you get the mercy by admitting that you done something wrong, admitting the part that you played. And then things will start to move forward. But as long as you hold on to those things and you don't outwardly admit, open yourself to God and give it to him, then you have the potential to stay where you're at. Now, Galatians chapter 6, 4 and 5 says that, for if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor, for each will have to bear his own load. So you can think highly of yourself. That's not what this is saying. But if you think that you're better than someone else, or your situation is better than someone else's, or worse than someone else, then you're deceiving yourself. You need to test your own self, look within your own self, and then you'll be able to, see things that you can fix and change. Because the word here says, for each will have to bear his own load. We have to carry our own crosses. You cannot carry another person's cross, although sometimes we like to think we can, but it's not possible. You can bear some load of somebody, but you cannot carry their cross. So it's beneficial if we focus on ourselves and work on ourselves so that we can carry our own cross that we were meant to carry. And it truly helps when you take a look at yourself when you need to bounce back from something. Looking at yourself, if you spend more time on what the thing is or who the person was, you stay the same. You can't change another person's actions. However, you can be attentive to your role and make choices and changes for yourself. Now, a few ways you could do that is to ask questions in your self-evaluation. Questions like, how did I get here? Instead of, why did this happen? Asking questions of how allows for open-minded answers and solutions. And then there's steps that you can take. Asking why permits blame of yourself and sulking and pity. And we know that gets us no place except depressed and stagnant in our going through. We start feeling bad for ourselves, but we're bouncing back and elevating above our current situation. So we have to be responsible for ourselves and our actions and learn from them so that we can grow and be even better than before. It's really holding yourself responsible, having a duty to deal with yourself before you attempt to deal with others who may have contributed to the situation you need to bounce back from. Even if it's that, you stayed too long at a job or in a relationship or made a decision that wasn't the right decision after all, it would help to do a self-check and be honest. You can mask your truth to everyone else but you. An old mentor of mine would always say to me, you take you wherever you go, Sadell. Wherever you go, you take you, so you can pretend to other people and you can, make up an alter ego or even move around like someone else. But you take you wherever you go. At the end of the day, you're still you and you have to deal with you. What role did you play in your situation that has kept you or is keeping you from bouncing back? If you're honest, you will find a few things you may have contributed to or things you allowed to fester that contributed to your situation. Most people avoid self-checks. They don't want to take accountability for their actions because it's easier to place blame on someone else for the most part, but you can't bounce back from a situation that is affecting you if you're not honest with all aspects that contributed to your situation and the part you played in it, because it's crucial to whether you bounce back or not. And that's just the bottom line. Self-checks is of the self. It has nothing to do with anyone else. So doing a self-check, being mindful in your self-check, will help you to bounce back because you're able to be honest and actually work on those things that you need to work on to be a better you. My third and final point is to redefine it. To bounce back from a place, from a space or a person, it's helpful if you redefine your situation into a more positive one. Look for something good in your going through. I know it's difficult at times, and actually it's just plain old hard to see good and bad when you are in the center of it, right? It's hard to see past what is currently taking place. All you can see is the struggle. All you can feel is the pain, and coming out of it is where you want to be, but it seems so far from your reach. In the middle of trials and tribulation, it is difficult to see God's hand in your life, but you can find wisdom in even the most difficult circumstances. Now, during one of my trials, I remember thinking, I will never get over this. This will never die down, and people will have so much to say. And it wasn't until I got a little strength, just a little strength. It wasn't until I wanted or decided to go on that I was able to see a light in the storm. I looked for and I found something good to work toward, turning my situation into a learning tool for myself and then others. And although my situation was heavy, it was heavy for me. I began to thank God for things like full use of my limbs. And although my mind was cluttered with what ifs and what's next and how damaged I was, thanking God was what helped me through. I thanked him that I was still able to think at all, right? The very air that I breathed is a blessing. So sometimes I would often focus on that. One major life event I endured 2 years ago almost took me out. I felt like it was the end of the world. However, I redefined that situation into something positive. Now, looking back, I can see how what I went through was necessary. Like, and I know that that's hard to hear too. Like, you hear people say, but it was necessary. When you going through it, you're not trying to hear that it was necessary. Like, how could someone hurting me so bad be necessary? How could me losing my job and I'm not able to provide for my family be necessary? But for me in my situation, it was necessary to break generational curses, for my children and my grandchildren to experience something new, to give hope to those who look like me and grew up where I grew up, who endured through many difficulties and have an outlook that things will never get better. My going through was beneficial for other people, and it didn't seem fair when I was actually going through it, when I would hear certain things like, at the end of all this, it's good, or, God, the scriptures that tell you that things are better at the end, and you're like, but I'm not there yet. I want it to be right now, fixed right now. I want it to come together right now. So with me, I used what I went through and found positive things in my present to help me press through for my coming out. People who did it in a fast bounce back, if they bounce back too quickly from something because they didn't allow the process to run its course, then they miss out on opportunities that they actually needed for the next going through. See, for those who did in fact bounce back, we feel unworthy to speak on the change of heart, the calling, and the struggles that we endure because we fear that people won't understand, But Romans 8:28 says that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord, for those that are called according to his purpose. So I know that we don't like to hear it in the thick of it, but that's truth. It is truth that no matter what you go through, good or bad, it works out for those who are obedient, for those who operate out of love, for those, who were oppressed by the hands of someone else or a situation, and they didn't deserve it. But God always heals, and he always restores, and he always provides, so we can take heart in that and be strengthened in that truth. Now, I redefined my storm into a podcast. I took what broke me and I used it for encouraging and giving hope to others. I took what broke me and shared it with others. And from that, God has been more than a provider. He's been more than a healer and a way maker towards me and my family and everyone who is connected to me. I used what broke me to bounce back, and now God uses me to speak to others, to preach and teach the gospel to all people, even those who played a role in my breakdown. I redefined my going through by mainly putting my trust in God and loving Him unconditionally. And in return, He continuously rewards my obedience. See, the pain you endure, the heartache, the disappointment, the failure, the opposition, the loss, the rejection, the betrayal, all of this God uses as tools to build our character, to give us wisdom and to birth something new. So don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of your going through. Don't be, embarrassed about where you're at, because all of those things can be used to birth something else, something bigger, something greater, because it is bigger than us. Redefining is to give new meaning to. So don't let what you're dealing with keep you from bouncing back. Roll with it. Take responsibility for your role and redefine it. It's difficult, but nothing beats a fail but a try. And if you try God first, He will provide what you need to bounce back from it. Well, thank you for joining me today. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our Facebook and YouTube pages at The Pretty Tough Room. And you can go ahead and download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and Spotify. And check us out at The Pretty Tough Room on Instagram. That's _ The Pretty Tough Room on Instagram. And remember, tough times never last, but tough people do.